All right, y'all. Here's the video as promised. So, we're already in a situation that's different than you may have remembered, right? We're online only. Yay! How awesome. So, grin and bear it with me. We'll get through it together. This class has historically all been done off campus anyway. So, at least for what you're going to be encountering in this class, it's not going to be much different than it ever was. One big change is that this class used to be taught in the fourth semester, and it's now being taught in the third semester. And historically, I've kind of loosened the reins on a lot of the students when we get into this class and kind of let them make mistakes and all that kind of fun stuff. Well, I'm still going to do that, but a little less so. So, one of the things that I'm going to do to kind of help you along is give you way more pointers than before and show you a lot more about how these things come together. So, first off, news forum and announcement. This is where I'm going to go and let you guys know things. Q&A forum. Go answer this question. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's the wrong one. Q&A forum. If you have questions about the class, go post them there. Getting started. This is something new in the online courses. This is just the template that we are using statewide now. So, it is what it is. So go through all of this stuff. Make sure you're reading all of it. Make sure you take a look at the syllabus because there is a syllabus agreement. Yeah, I read it. I saw it. I know it's coming up. Here's the TSCC Student Handbook. You're bound by those rules. If you have any questions about how to navigate Moodle, here they are. You can find answers here. And just in case, basically the gist of this one is just email us. Let us know that you're having issues and we can work through them. And then here's kind of the expectations for email and voicemail in case you need to get in touch with me in either of those ways. And then discussion etiquette. So when you're this, I plan on making a post here as well, answering the same exact question that you guys are answering. So you're not in that one alone. But the discussion etiquette, keep as best you can the etiquette to the highest standard. All right, so to the class. Here we are. We've got all of this stuff that we've got to do throughout the entire semester. I'm going to let you in on a secret. You can't skip any of these. You can't. The reason being, you really can't. Because what ends up happening is in this very first lab, we're going to be building an entire network that's going to consist of, at least for now, it will consist of one router and one machine behind that router. pfSense, as you can download here. And if you need help with that, there's an installation document that will help you step you through the process. But pfSense is a router, just like Cisco, just like the one that sits in your house that gives you Wi-Fi and all of that kind of thing. pfSense is a router. That's all it is. It has functionalities that you would expect out of a router. Has DNS, has DHCP, has all that kind of fun stuff, right? So be aware that when I say pfSense, all I'm really talking about is the thing that gets you internet or the thing that connects up more than one network together, right? So pfSense is going to be one of the devices that we're going to be setting up today and y'all through the week, as well as a Windows machine. So obviously, y'all have gone through 2 semesters where you've been installing Windows 10, so I'm not going to delve very far into that other than give you a couple of pointers. But pfSense, that's something that you, I suspect, have never seen before, certainly not in a capacity like this. So I'll be making sure to talk about pfSense, how to set it up, what it means, what all the stuff is, and all of that. So I went ahead and downloaded pfSense a little while ago. Let me make sure that I can open this thing. It's a gzip. Yeah, okay, cool. It's doing its thing. Anyhow, here's the information, or here are the 2 ISOs that you're going to need this week, and here's an installation doc for pfSense. I didn't include that for Windows 10, as I mentioned before. We've gone through that a bunch of times. And once we start talking about Windows, I'll give you those pointers. WebEx, just as I mentioned before, we're online, right? You don't have to show. There's no attendance. Let me put it that way. There is no attendance. I won't say you don't have to show up, because if you are struggling early on in this class, it is going to snowball. I promise. And there's no way out. There is no way out in this class if you start falling behind early. Because as I mentioned before, every lab builds on, you can't skip the labs because every lab builds on the previous lab. I've got it kind of forked out where we deal with Windows 1 week and then Linux 1 week and then Windows 1 week and then Linux another week. So, I mean, technically, you could skip all the Linux stuff and get all the Windows side done, but that scores you about a 50, which is not passing. So again, if you're going to get any far at all on either side of this class, then you have to stay caught up. So I will say that the due dates are soft. If you have an issue over the weekend and I open up my WebEx on Tuesday and you've got a couple of questions for me before you can submit your assignment, that's fine. Get it in on that Tuesday and everything's golden. And then get started on the new lab the following week. So I just want you all to remember, you just can't skip them. Keep that in mind. It will just snowball on you if you try. So anyway, here's the deal. Pretty much every single one of these weeks that we deal with anything, there's only going to be one overarching topic that we're going to be attacking. And this week is more of a foundational thing. We're just setting things up, making sure things are working so that when we start expanding into Linux and start expanding into building servers like DHCP, DNS, web servers, things like that, that you will have a good, solid foundation on which to get your network set up. That is what this week is all about. So getting into that, here's what you're going to need. You're going to need a Windows VM, Windows 10. You can download the ISO right there or the link on the previous page. Use the minimum requirements. You guys know how we've been setting up Windows here lately over these past 2 semesters, so you know how that performs on your system. You can give it more CPU, RAM, disk space than we have in the past, or you can give it less so long as Windows continues to work for you. If it has to be slower, it has to be slower. If it can be faster, please make it faster. It's only going to help you out if you do try to add some resources to it. But be always wary of the idea of oversubscription. Oversubscription is this idea that, if you only have 4 gigs of RAM on your machine, you can't go give a VM 5 gigs of RAM. That is just not a thing you can do. If you've only got 2 CPUs, you can't give a VM 3, right? That's the idea. But you got to remember that outside of storage, and only because you can lazy allocate, right? The dynamic stuff where it doesn't actually use up memory until you actually put files on it, right? Outside of that, you have to remember that these VMs, if you're running them at the same time, are additive, right? So specifically talking about RAM here, if you have 4 gigs of RAM and you give one VM 2 gigs of RAM, one VM 2 gigs of RAM, one VM 2 gigs of RAM, you've allocated 6 gigs of RAM, right? You have oversubscribed by more than 2 gigs of RAM because the host operating system needs RAM too. So keep those things in mind. CPUs can actually be oversubscribed as long as you're not oversubscribing by 1 VM at a time. So think about it like this. You have a dual-core CPU, 2 CPUs on that device, and you've got 4 VMs. You can give each of those VMs 1 core, equaling up to 4 cores, right? But because the CPU can work in a dynamic, and we were talking about them in the operating systems class where you've got, and also in the Linux class where we were talking about, those have just escaped me for now. But the way that the CPU deals with requests, right? It prioritizes them and can slow some down to speed some up, things like that. So you can get away with a little oversubscription on the CPU. But mainly when I'm talking about oversubscription, I'm talking about RAM. You do have to be wary of storage as well. And don't just fill up your disk. It will happen if you're not careful. So keep those things in mind. If you are afraid of the settings that you are choosing, that maybe you will oversubscribe or something like that, run them by me. I'm happy to tell you and happy to point you in the right direction of how to get these things set up correctly. The whole point of this class is I'm not going to give you all the answers. You're going to have to dig them up. And that the act of digging them up, you can ask me. I am a resource for you. So if it's something I think you should know, or if it's something that I know is right in front of you, obviously I'll point you to that resource. But yeah, I mean, questions about oversubscription, that stuff is not easy. So please have that conversation with me. Right? Email, Slack, WebEx, Tuesdays, Fridays, all that. You know, get a hold of me. All right, so pfSense. Give it at least this stuff. I don't care if you go over here. 1 CPU, a gig of RAM, and 10 gigs disk. I think by default, pfSense is a free BSD derivative. So when you're creating it in VirtualBox, as we will go through this in just a minute, you will see. I'll choose those things, and by default, that is actually the default stuff, except for the disk. Disk defaults to 16 gigs, so you can just accept the defaults on that. You will have to go in and change up some of the network stuff. VMs typically only get one network interface when you start out, but we want 3 in this case. Right? I mean, think of your typical Cisco router. Remember when you're sitting in the lab, you're looking at those green or gray devices. How many Ethernet ports do those devices have? All right, at least 2 for sure. And when y'all were connecting up routers, remember that you had those serial ports as well, which makes 3 and 4. Most of those cards had 2 serial ports. So most of those routers had 4 interfaces. We're going with 3 because we're only going to have one network set up to communicate to the internet and 2 additional network interfaces, one to connect to our Windows network, one to connect to our Linux network. Here's the ISO, but again, it's on the main page. Make sure when you're going in and selecting that, you choose the AMD 64 CD image. Otherwise, it will not install. So I don't have a link to the direct ISO, so it's not just a one-clicker kind of thing. You got to come down here, choose your architecture, right? AMD 64, and then CD image. And there's an Austin one, so pick that one. It's a little faster. Click download. That will be your image. This image, as you saw, comes down in a TGZ file. So that is going to end up putting you in a situation where you're going to have to extract this. So make sure you extract this. Let me see. Oops. Oh, great. Let me see. Oh, Mac. You're going to do this to me, aren't you? I think you got to go out and get all kinds of crazy stuff to make this work on a Mac. And I despise that. Let's see if that works. Okay, good. There it goes. Okay, so in Windows, you typically you can't do that. You don't have that unarchived thing. 7-zip is a really good alternative to deal with file formats that you're not typically used to. Like RAR will probably not open on Windows by default, neither will 7-zip or gzip, but 7-zip handles all of those. So the easiest way to do this is to just go grab the exe file, or if you want a pretty little installer, you can go grab the MSI file. Either or. And this very top one is good. Make sure you're at 7-zip.org to get this software. Don't just Google and go onto some random file hippo website to go download this stuff. Go to the official website, which is 7-zip.org. So go there. Then you'll be able to extract this ISO. The reason they do that is it compresses the file right? I mean, just like a zip and a RAR and everything else, it compresses a file so that you don't have to, you don't get to download as much information. So it's faster for you, it's easier on their resources, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so let's dive into setting this thing up. All right, so I've already got a Windows 10 VM running in the background. Like I said, I'm skipping a lot of the how-to on that because you guys should be familiar with it by now. But one of the things that you need to pay attention to on your Windows VM is do not use or create a Microsoft account. When you get to the point where you are choosing your user account, make sure to choose the domain join option, and then it will let you create a local account expecting you to join a domain later on. We will do that, just not yet. I think it's week 4 or 5, something like that, that we will build the domain and join machines to it. So outside of that, also insert guest edition CD image and install the drivers. This will just make things way easier for you. You can do like this. You can change the resolution of your VM, make it a little easier for you to get to things. So be aware. So pop in that disk. It'll show up as a CD drive. You can go into it and then just run this thing. It'll figure out which architecture you are on, which is honestly just this. But to avoid confusion, just run that. It'll take care of itself. And then just run through the installer, reboot, and you're done. That's all there is to it. Nothing special. All right, and then I'll show you how to configure the network once we're done. So pfSense, type BSD, and it's a 64-bit version of FreeBSD. 1 gig of RAM there by default. It's fine with me. Create a virtual disk. Keep on keeping on. There's the default to 16. That's fine. You can leave it there. You don't have to bring it down to 10 if you don't want to. It's either way. All right, but before we start this thing up, settings. We need to come into the network. Now, I've got bridged in the instructions. However, you don't have to do that. Let me explain why I have it set to bridged. Setting it to bridged is basically telling the VM to directly utilize your network card, whether that be Wi-Fi or whether that be Ethernet, however you're setting it up, whatever you're attaching it to, that's what bridged adapter does. If you take a look, right, it'll take the Wi-Fi port, or it will choose, you can tell it to choose one of these other things. I could have an Ethernet on my Thunderbolt 1 or something like that, right? Or you can leave it as NAT. So I tell you to do the bridged adapter because you get better performance out of it, and if you're not moving around a lot, if you're just stuck at home, bridged will be fine. Where bridged falls down, however, is when you are moving from place to place often. A lot of times, if you're working on your setup at home, then you bring your laptop up to school, and you know everything is slept. You didn't shut anything down. You bring it back up. It's broken because on the bridged adapter, your router expects the network card to be attached to the same MAC address on the far side the entire time, unless you reboot. So you can run into issues. So the simpler way to deal with this is just leave it as NAT, and it will figure it out by itself. So feel free to leave it either way. If you have trouble with one, use the other. So adapter 2. It is not attached, so let's attach it. Set that one up to internal network. We will name it. Now, you have to name these things differently, otherwise they will essentially be on the same network. Actually, not essentially. They will be on the same network, so you've got to be careful with that. So for me, I'm just going to name it Win. And this other one, I'll name Lin. You can go with full Windows, full Linux. Doesn't matter, so long as you have a separate, different name between these two adapters, right? So there's your network setup. That's pretty much all you got to do here. Outside of this, you can assign it another CPU. It won't really help. This is not a very heavy distro or a very heavy operating system or anything like that. So it's, yeah, you can get away with giving it very little. Let me start this guy up. So we got to find our pfSense ISO. I think that was all in downloads, right? Yep, there it is. pfSense 245. Very cool. Choose that and start. So not really exciting as it boots up. And on the screen that we're looking at now on this VM, you really won't get much of anything exciting. It will give you some information after we're done, but that's pretty much it. So don't expect much. So if it boots from the CD, it's going to drop you straight into the installer. There's really not, you don't really get any choices or anything like that. You used to, but not anymore. So keyboard through this, you want to install. The default key map is ENUS, which is English US, so leave it alone. Auto UFS. I'm not very concerned about the way that we're partitioning this thing. It kind of takes care of itself. And the backups, the configuration download, super simple. So there's really not much of a need to do any kind of like disk cloning for backup or anything like that. Just a small, less than 1 megabyte configuration file is all that you need. You can kind of think of the configuration file in pfSense a lot like the way that a text file copy of the startup config on a Cisco device. That's pretty much exactly what it is. Just setting, yes, no, yes, no. What is it set to? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, all the way down. And that's it. It really is that fast. So the installation is now done. Before exiting the installer, would you like to open a shell? We don't. We're just going to let it reboot, and then it will start helping us make decisions about how we're setting this router up. So we're going to reboot. I don't think it kicks out the disk, so you have to be very careful with that. Watch this icon. If it does not gray out on you, the disk is still in there, and it will try to boot again. Yep, take it out. It will probably fail here. Yeah, it's mad at me. But that's fine. Take that out. Reboot it again. And it will boot into the actual disk instead. Let that get all the way through. Shouldn't take too long to boot. pfSense, like I said, still lightweight, so doesn't take too long. The one thing that you will be waiting on if it's taken forever is connection to the internet. It tries to wait quite a while to make sure that all of the interfaces, there it is right there, configuring WAN interface. So it's trying, and if it hangs right there, it means that it cannot get an internet connection, or at least IP addressing information, right? It is stalled at that point. It will eventually let up and just move on, but as you'll see here in a minute, the screen will not look correct. I'll show you here. All right, so look at WAN and then look at LAN. So WAN, it's got an IP address, 10.02.15. That should look very familiar. That it is what it is, right? You set it to NAT, it's 10.02.15. That's the way that it works. So if you do not have an IP address there, it probably hung up on that WAN configuration and couldn't get an IP address. There's really not a whole lot that you can do here outside of just make sure the settings are correct and reboot the machine. It will automatically pick up an IP address. If it's not, it's troubleshoot time. LAN. This, by default, 192.168.1.1. You guys really got to pay attention here. What is the IP address or the network ID of your own network? You're sitting there listening to my video right now. What is your IP address? What is that network ID? I bet you money it's 192.168.1.0/24. Now, when you're connecting up two routers, one of the big rules is you cannot have network overlap, right? That means that if I use 192.168.1.1 on one side of one router, and I try to use 192.168.1.1 on the other side of a separate router, and then I want them to communicate, not happening. It will not work. You will confuse the router, and it's like, but you are 192.168.1.1. Who are you trying to talk to, right? So be aware of that. That is extremely important. So long story short, change the LAN IP. You have to. It will conflict. Well, unless you've got some kind of custom setup at home, you just left it at default, it will conflict. So be careful with this, and I'll show you how to do that. So change the IP address of that, 192.168.1.1. I don't want that anymore. So do option 2, which is set interface IP, and then it says, all right, well, which one, WAN or LAN? So choose number 2 for LAN. And what do you want the new IP address to be? So let me see, in the lab, do I tell you what to use? Nope. You can use whatever you want, as long as it's not 192.168.1.1. Well, that entire network is off limits. So the only real rule is just don't overlap with networks that you're going to be on. There you go. So it can be anything. Quit that. 172.16. I don't know. 100 sounds fun. 100.1. Choose something different than that as well. You really need to start spreading your wings when it comes to what IP addresses can I use, what are my options, right? RFC 1918. You've seen it. You maybe not have called it that, but it's your private IP addressing set. Something inside of there that is not what I used and that is not what your home network uses. 24 is fine. You can leave it as 24. Double check on that. Make sure. Yeah, 24. Good. And this question is typically always empty. There is no upstream gateway address for this. This is if you're configuring a WAN IP and you are you're double natting, or you've got another router in front of you before you can get out of the network or something like that. You will set one of those up here. You'll tell it where the router is. But other than that, for us, a LAN, we don't need this. So just hit enter. And we're not going to be focusing on IPv6. We're more focusing on the server side of things. So that can also be skipped with enter. Now you do want to answer yes to this. You do want to say yes, enable DHCP. Otherwise, things you put on the network just won't work, right? They will not automatically get an IP address unless you are intimately familiar, which you should be because you're setting it up. With your network IP addressing, you're going to have trouble. So pay special attention to the things that you put here, right? Every choice that you've made up to this point, write it down. We haven't gone very far, which means that over the last 3 minutes, if you've been following along, write it down. Remember what you chose, write it down. So in this case, I'm going to start at, let's say 100. So what it's asking is what range of what is the DHCP server range that you want to use? So on the low end, I want to give it 100. On the high end, we're not going to have a lot of devices. So, I mean, you can give it like 5. That would probably take care of it, to be honest. I'll give it 199. That'll give us an exact amount, 100 IP addresses. Counting the 100.100, that is 100 total IP addresses. So do you want to revert to HTTP as the Web Configurator Protocol? Web Configurator is pfSense's way of saying the web interface. So think about your router at home. How do you get into it? You type in its IP address, right? And then you give it admin and then the default password that's under the router. You better not be, right? You better have your own password on that. Change that from the default. And we'll do that here in pfSense as well. So that's the Web Configurator. If you're trying to hit it on the web, that's Web Configurator. So when we, on our Windows machine, decide to log into pfSense, same as you would your router at home, do you want to use HTTP or HTTPS? Coming from any security posture, we should be nodding our heads at HTTPS. We want the S. The S stands for secure, yeah. Right, you do want that. So that does kind of make it for an awkward answer on this. So do you want to revert to HTTP? No, because it's already by default HTTPS. So it's asking, do you want to strip the S off of the web interface? And we do not want to do that. Leave it HTTPS. All right, and there it is. So if we take a look again, WAN stayed the same. That should not have changed. And LAN did change from 192.168.1.1 to 172.16.100.1. Okay. Now you might be thinking, you might have caught it earlier, but you're probably thinking, Leo, you had an interface for the internet, an interface for Windows, and then an interface for Linux. Where did the third one go? Good question. Nowhere, actually. We just haven't enabled it. So there won't be a third one showing up yet, but there will be a third one once you configure it. So be patient. It will show up. All right, so that's pretty much it, right? So if you look at this, you don't have to worry about much of anything. here is a nice little tip. The default credentials to log into pfSense is admin/pfSense. Now here, this one gets a lot of people. I don't care what your range is. It could be it could be 10 IP addresses. It could be 20 IP addresses. It could be 100 IP addresses. It could be an entire 254 254 IP addresses. It doesn't matter. What I'm telling you here is the first 5 IP addresses that are usable need to be off limits to devices. So in my case, if we're looking back at pfSense, right? This is the first IP address, 1, right? 0 is the network ID, so can't do that. And it's going to be the same for y'all as well, because I'm asking you guys to use a /24. So everybody's network is going to start at 0, which means that 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are reserved for things. As we build things, we'll divvy out those IP addresses. And what I'd like you guys to do is hang on to a network like this, or keep this in mind as you pass this class and move on, that you can continue building things, continue adding things to your network, and you can then assign them .3 and .4 and .5. But really what we're doing is we're basically carving out a few IP addresses just so that we have a handful of IP addresses that we can assign to things that will never, ever change. So that's what I mean by this. Reserve the first 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, off limits. You cannot assign them to anything unless we're talking about, all right, this server, give it one of the reserved IP addresses. All right. And you're going to want to do this for both. Once we get it all configured up, you'll want to do the same thing on the Linux side. So here we go. Log into the pfSense, or log into pfSense from the web interface. Well, you can't get into the web interface without a VM already. So let's take a look at the networking. You can leave your VMs on while you make these network changes. You can't add or remove hardware, but you can configure the hardware in some cases. And this is one of those cases. So adapter 1, change that to Win, hit OK. All right. Give that just a sec. You should. There we go. Networks. Network 2. Are you sure? This is cool. In this case, I can do, yeah, this is our network. We don't have to worry about other people getting onto this network. If people are getting onto your virtual network that you've created in VirtualBox, someone has stolen your laptop. So I'm assuming there won't be anybody on there. All right. So internet or not. If you don't have internet now, then it's something that we can work through. We'll watch my network to see whether or not the internet's going to come back up. But regardless, you don't need internet for this lab. So what we want to do, CMD, check on a few things, right? ipconfig. Does that look right? Pause the video for a second. Ask yourself that question. Does that look right from what I have configured? Spoiler alert, it does, right? Because I created a network, 172.16.100.0/24.1 is the router, and I started my DHCP range at 100, which means that this device got the first IP address in the range. And that's good. Default gateway, 100.1. Is that right? Yeah, because default gateway is synonymous with your router. Let's check out some other stuff as well. IP address subnet mask looks good. Default gateway looks good. DHCP server, obviously, we set it up on that machine. DNS servers, and your router is going to be playing the DNS role for now. That will change later on in the semester, but for now, this is it. All right, so technically I have internet, but it looks like, because that little globe still has this thing. Another lesson. This is Leo the IT guy, less than Leo the instructor. Never, ever trust that icon. Actually try it. Look at it, 8.8.8. That's on the internet. That icon is not telling you the whole story. right? There is connectivity, but likely what's happening here is I don't have DNS. And if I do have DNS resolution, then that thing is just straight up lying to me. But I suspect it will not work. Yeah. So for some reason, our router is not passing on the DNS requests that we want. And it says query refused, which makes it seem like a firewall issue. Either way, I'll show you how to fix that. We just swap it from the resolver to the forwarder, and it works just fine. I'll explain what that means here in a little bit. All right. But can we ping 16.100.1? Aha. Cool. So there's our router. God forbid you have to use Edge. But it'll work, so why not? 172.16.100.1. So if you go there, this side is not secure. Right? Now, that is okay. Let me tell you why. If you look at the certificate, you'll actually see what's going on here. It is a pfSense certificate. It was issued by itself. It's a self-signed certificate. What that really means is we did not go out to DigiCert or VeriSign and buy ourselves a certificate that is valid outside of our network. But that's okay. That is okay. We can continue on anyway. So this is good. As I mentioned before, admin pfSense by default. No thanks, Microsoft. Now here, you can go through, if you'd like. I'm going to go through it because I suspect that some of you guys will go through this, and this will just clear up any questions that you might have. Normally, 9 times out of 10, I just come and click on this, and it drops you right at the very beginning, drops you at the dashboard, which is pretty much the overview of how the router is working. So we'll next on through. We don't get support, right? That was that last question there. Set your host name, whatever you want it to be. I don't want it to be pfSense. Let's make it my router. And domain, let me see. Do I make comment on your domain yet? We will set that. I just don't remember if I do it now. Does not look like it. Okay, so I'm going to leave it the way that it is. And we can come back to that as we mess around. So here, this I think is actually part of the problem that we're running into with Windows. I'll show you how to do it if you just click on the pfSense logo up at the top and skip the wizard as well, though, so don't worry about that. So primary DNS server, I mean, you can set it to whatever you want to. You can set it to your real, actual, real living, breathing router in your house. You can set it to that. That is fine. However, most enterprises will opt to not roll their own DNS, especially if they don't have any in-house things that they need to be able to resolve. Some will, some won't. It's really up to you, but it's safe to 1.1.1.1. This is Cloudflare. 8.8.8.8 and 8844 is Google. This is Cloudflare here. I think there's also a 7777. Maybe. I think that's OpenDNS. Maybe. Maybe not. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Use any public DNS that you wish. It doesn't matter what goes here. So this, you typically want to either use this or use this. Either or. Now, it ends up being kind of a conflict. Not really a conflict. It ends up being a bit of a battle to remember which is which. So here's what's happening. You are assigning a primary and secondary DNS server for this router. If you leave that box checked, it will allow the assignment of DNS servers as well. So if you're setting primary, secondary here, there's a good chance you want to uncheck the box, override DNS. Now, really, this is just going to kind of boil down to a non-issue anyway, but I don't know. I just like to explain the options that come up. So anyhow, those are the DNS servers, and I'm gonna say no. We're gonna send out all of our DNS requests to those guys here. And do not worry, there always is going back. If you make a mistake during this setup, no big deal. We will find the real where inside the system or in the interfaces that we need to go to fix it. We'll fix it. We are, I think this is us, but we can just go to America Chicago. There we are. That'll do. And you can leave this alone. You don't have to worry about this. This is just one that pfSense chose for you, and that's fine. All right, DHCP. Now, this is the same kind of situation that we were in a little while ago. No, I'm sorry. This is not. We're talking about WAN. So leave this alone. WAN should be getting an IP address from either VirtualBox, because we set it to NAT, or your router, if you set it to your real live actual router in your house, if you set it to bridged. But in both scenarios, it should be set to DHCP. Everything else here is just configuring the way that the interface works, or if you're setting a static stuff, you will go set it down here, but we are not. So we can move on to this one. Now, these are some really cool firewalling rules that we will talk about a little bit later in the semester. We'll go a little bit in depth because we'll be configuring the firewall as well. If you want to change the IP address here, you can. At the end of it, or getting toward the end of it, change your password. And now we're going to reboot. All right. So when you click that button, you can actually come over here to the pfSense VM itself and just watch. Oh, it said reload. I thought it was going to actually reboot. It's not. It doesn't. Yay, cool. So that's it. There's your wizard. Finish it up. The stuff that we changed. Oh, it's going to make you agree. Hang on. There it goes. Yes, yes. Whew. I don't know if you can hear it. You can probably, if you turn it up a little bit, you can hear this laptop spinning up. It's getting warm. It's kind of warm in this room. So that's probably part of the reason there. Lucky for us, we're already on the latest version, so there's no need to update. But if you do see updates, go ahead and run them. It is a good habit to get into. Obviously, after hours, if you're doing this as a job, right? But it's always a good idea to get into the habit of checking on what is changing in an update. They will give you a link to the change log. If any of those issues affect you in the real world, right? They won't in this lab because, I mean, we're not even exposed to the real internet directly anyway. But as you move into a job that has you managing a router, you really do want to be wary of the updates that are coming down to you, what they change, how much it's been tested, and when is the best time to actually do those updates, right? And, you know, the answer to that question is pretty much when nobody's around, because it's a router, right? If you take down the router, the internet goes away. So be careful with that stuff. Have those questions in mind as you're going through. Okay, so we got through that. Looks like DNS is still busted. Oh, nope. Hey, it's working now. I think we're good. Oh, maybe not. There we go. We happening? Come on now. Okay. Just been a little on the slow side. Seems like it's all right. Ooh, see, and that's why I hate ads. Gross. Oh, I think it's my machine. It's the fan is getting even higher. I'm guessing there's a bit of throttling going on right now because my laptop's getting a little hot to the touch. Whew, wow, gosh. This the Mac that I'm on is that aluminum unibody. You touch the top of this Mac and it is just, you fry an egg on that thing. So yeah. Anyhow, let's get through the rest of this. That way my laptop doesn't explode. So anyway, you're going to go in and actually configure the other interface. Here's the idea with this. First things first, you want to rename LAN to Win or Windows, and I'm recommending Windows here, so we'll do that. Come on now. There we go. So interfaces. You only see WAN LAN here, but go to assignments. You can see what's going on here. So WAN, EM0, LAN, EM1, and EM2. This is a lot like ETH0, ETH1, ETH2, or that ENP0S3, ENP0S8 that you see a lot of times on Linux. This is just a BSD way to do it. They are talking, that's pretty much it. That's what they're talking about. So notice there's an add right next to EM2. Now, I want to make a quick note. Look at this. Here's your MAC address. If you are ever in doubt as to which interface is attached to what on VirtualBox, let's take a look. So go into network. Adapter 1 is NAT. I know that it's WAN, and I can prove it. If you go down to advanced, you can see the last 6 digits of the MAC address. 2BF152. Match it up over here. 2BF152. You can do that to the second one as well. 544747. 544747. That's the win. So we know which one we need to name Windows. Adapter 3, 89B5E3, 89B5E3. Right? So if you're ever in doubt, if you ever forget, if you did not document it, you forgot to do it, you need to come back around, do some documentation, which interface is what, this is the way that you can actually go in and prove that each network interface is what you say that it is. All right, so let's change the name of LAN first. Just click on LAN and rename this guy. Windows. Cool. Don't need to make any changes. Those changes were made in the interface itself. In the pfSense interface up here, right here. This guy. So no need to make any changes other than the name. There. So go back to interfaces again. Go back to assignments. Now, there's nothing to click over here because we have not even initialized this network interface. So that's what we're going to do now. Hit add. Click on opt1. Name it Linux and enable it. Now, we're not going to worry too much about getting it set up, right? Oh, no, we are. All right, let's go through the whole process then. All right, so let's get it set up. We're going to need to set a static IP address for this guy. So right here, IPv4 configuration type. How do you want to do it? Static. Then like magic, a new section opens up down here, and you can set the addresses. So 172.16.100.1 is the network, or is the interface IP address on pfSense for that network. But Linux is going to be, the Linux network is going to be a separate, different network. So it cannot have the same network ID, and it can't have the same IP addresses as well. Let's say 200.1. And this is that question that it was asking. We didn't actually give it one, so we can skip this. But you do want to make sure that you choose the correct subnet mask here. And this is the same. These were checked on the other one. Again, we'll talk about these rules, what they mean, why. But for now, we'll just turn them on. Just turn them on. Apply changes. Now, you might be wondering, hey, why every time I make a change do I have to click apply changes? Well, same in Cisco. You make a change and you're basically running it in memory, right? If you reboot without saving, what happens to those changes? They go away. Same here. That apply changes is basically a shortcut to running write mem or copy run start. That's why it asks you twice. You save it once and then it's like, are you sure? Yeah. You need to verify it. All right, so now under interfaces, we see 3. WAN, Windows, Linux. You can even go into WAN if you want to. And name this guy Internet. Just in case you need the extra prodding there. That is also fine. So the next little bit was go into services to DHCP server and choose the Linux interface and enable DHCP. We've got to do that too. So services, DHCP server. You have a Windows. If you did not initialize the Linux interface, it's not going to show up here. You have to initialize that interface first. Click on Linux. Obviously, it's not enabled. We've got to come in here and enable it. And we need to tell it what the range needs to be. So I'm just going to mirror what we had on the other side, except, obviously, the network ID is different. 2.172.16.2, 200.199. That's all good. There's nothing that we need to worry about right here. All the way down, all the way down. We don't have to worry too much about those things. However, the DHCP server in pfSense is actually quite advanced. It does anything that you want it to do. So if you guys would like, we could talk a little bit about that, but it's not necessarily part of the course. We're looking at just some basic infrastructure, not diving too deep. All right. So now if we put a machine on the Linux side, we'll be good. Except the firewall. All right, so firewall rules. Here is the deal. When you create a new interface on a firewall, or on this firewall, none of the rules move over. Let me explain to you what I'm talking about. So let's look at internet or WAN. These are the two rules that it has. Basically what it's saying is it's blocking IP addresses that are not private but should not be on the internet, and then blocking private IP addresses. So none of that stuff can come in to the network. So if you look at Windows, oh wow, I think I was looking at, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So in Windows, we basically have the anti-lockout rule. This is basically saying if you're coming from a Windows IP address, port 443 and port 80 are always going to be open. No matter what you do, no matter how many times you bang on it or whatever, this rule will make that open all the time. So you want this rule because you do kind of always want to be able to get into the web interface to make configuration changes. Now, a lot of times what will end up happening is there will be another network here, maybe an opt2, that we named a management, and only this rule exists in management only. Windows and Linux can't do this, right? They can't access the firewall or pfSense. So we're not too concerned about that at this moment. Now this is basically a rule that says if you're dealing with IPv4 coming from the Windows network, do whatever you want. As long as it's coming from an IP address on Windows Net, do whatever you want. Anything will be allowed out. Same with IPv6, though, look at the stats on this. Even though IPv6 is available, nobody's using it. So this rule can be glossed over because it is not going to be used. But for full disclosure and all of that, we're going to copy it over too. Okay. The easy way to do this is to copy and paste. Well, you can't literally copy and paste, but what you can do is this. Copy. It'll take you into the rule, and then it's going to ask, what interface do you want it on? You want it on the Linux interface now. But it's quite literally copied things, right? So it's saying your source is still Windows Net. Well, that's not going to work for us, because if we're talking about Linux, then we're probably talking about Linux Net. And this is just a shortcut for the Linux network ID, or the entire network itself. So if you were to go in and change the IP address of Linux, the interface, then this would still work, because it doesn't care about a single IP address or a network ID. It's really looking at whatever the Linux interface has. That's what I'm talking about. So we want that to LinuxNet. And then we can leave that description in there because it is what it is. Now, this is what I was talking about right here. I turned this on, but it turns out that was by mistake. So I'll show you how to go turn this off. You can't just delete them. Notice. There's no trash can over here either. So I'll show you what I did to break that. So anyway, Windows, we want this other one. Copy that guy. Actually, you don't have to check it. You just click copy. Interface to Linux. Swap that to LinuxNet. And save that bad boy. And then the other one, the other rule. Ooh, looks like you're going to have to just create this rule. Well, we can leave it off. It's okay, because it actually, it's a pass rule anyway, so it's going to work regardless. So we can skip that rule. We'll apply these changes. Now let me fix this. Those shouldn't be there. I added those by mistake. So if you go into Interface, go back into Linux, scroll all the way down to the bottom, it's these. And I realize that's actually a really bad thing, right? Block private networks. Well, our network is private, so everything would have gotten blocked. So take both those rules off, and let's go compare. Firewall, rules, internet, that's fine. These are fine here on the internet. Windows, got those two rules plus the anti-lockout rule. And then Linux, same deal. Just because I'm a little weird about it, I'm going to put them in order, the same order that they are in Windows. But that should do it. Oh, look, hey, it finally decided we had internet. See what I'm talking about? Like, we literally had internet for minutes, and I didn't even notice when that changed, but it was lying to me. All right, so here's the deal with this. We should be good to go. How do I prove it? Right? Because I'm coming down here and I'm saying test both networks for internet connectivity. Right? And I'm going to look for those screenshots down here. On the Windows side, ping something. Ping a name. Ping google.com, actually, specifically. And show me that it worked. And then same with Linux. Or the Linux network. So, man, Mac, I really just feel like Mac is not very intuitive. But anyway, how do you change that? Same way we put it on the Windows network in the first place. So internal network, Win, right? Let's change that. Lin. Hit OK. Now things will obviously break. My network connection broke. I do have a new network now, though. No, the one before. So the one that I installed with was network 1. The Windows network is network 2, and now Linux is network 3. So ipconfig. What do I got? Does that look right? Check it out. Before, I was looking at 172.16.100 dot. Ooh, a little further up. Dot 100. Swapped networks and too far. No, come back. Okay, that was too far. There we go. Now, 172.16.200.100. So obviously I've got what I want there in a lookup, whatever, yahoo.com. Well, for the grade, obviously, google.com is what you want. There you go. Head somewhere. Something picture heavy. Now, speed is not a huge concern here. We're already double natting, and we're already setting up things that you wouldn't typically do in the real world. However, we don't have access to the server equipment at in the classroom, so it is what it is. Plus, this network's portable. The lab at school, obviously, is not. All right, so internet, obviously, it's looking good. And that's it. We've hit all of the points, all of the things, everything you need to do. You need to work through that, and then you need to go prove that it works. That is the whole deal here. Make sure everything works. Test it, prove it. Spend a little time on the internet. You know, whatever you typically do, and try it out. Actually use it for a little bit to verify that it's working the way that you expect. So the last little thing that I had mentioned was, as I was going through that wizard, I said that I was going to show you guys how to do it if you didn't go through the wizard. So if you clicked on pfSense and just skip the wizard, you can go under General Setup here and then set up. Oh, hang on. Why is it asking me that? All right, well, whatever. Let me go back to it real quick. Oh, it was this. It was the... Okay, well, it didn't actually save, so it's fine either way. I'll just let it bug me. So anyway, under General Setup, these are the things that you were setting up, right? My router, local domain, DNS servers right there. Setting up the DNS server override, setting up your time zone, your time server, English, what kind of themes you want. And this is actually more than was in the... Oh, cool, you can change that. Whoa, cool, lots of color combination. So feel free to customize it if you want to, right? And that's pretty cool. All right. That's it. This is where you go to skip the wizard. If you're skipping the wizard, make sure you answer at least the first 4 boxes and then decide whether or not you want that. But that'll do it. Log out of this guy. Don't forget your password. Actually, you know what? You can. You totally can. There's a way to reset it here. It's in here somewhere. There it is. Number 3. Hit option 3. Reset web configurator password. I can't remember if it tells you to reset the password. I don't think it does. I think it just sets it back to admin pfSense or something like that. But either way, follow the instructions on it, and it'll take care of you. There you go. So if you restart it, or if you hit enter, if you hit enter, you'll see Internet, Windows, Linux now. So you'll have everything set up the way you expect. All right. Hopefully that'll cover pretty much all the questions you may or may not have. However, if you run into issues, please do not hesitate to ask. I will help as much as I possibly can, and we'll get through it. That's the deal. We'll get through it. Okay, I'll kill the recording here.